Well, welcome back everybody to the Life and Times of Crazy Patrick. I'm going to go into the third and final chapter of my story about Billy the Kid and Pat Garrett. And I hope you'll leave me some comments. You'll tell me one way or another what you believe. And we'll just go from there. And leave me those thumbs up, those likes. That really helps my channel. Leave me lots of comments. That helps my channel. And if you're new to my channel, I hope you'll subscribe. And from all my old-time subscribers, I'm glad you're staying with me. Thank you so much. Well, in today's video, we're going to go over the Brushy Bill Roberts story according to William Morrison. William Morrison was not just some yahoo off the street. He was a well-educated, highly educated man. He was an attorney. So you kind of have to use some, I call it Judge Judy reasoning. You know, if a story makes sense, it's true. If it doesn't make sense, it's not true. So here we go, guys. Dive into the story. In 1949, William Morrison was working as a probate attorney for a firm out of St. Louis. He was sent to work on a case with an old man in Florida named Joe Hines. Joe Hines was trying to claim property in Florida that was left to him by his deceased brother. And I guess probate was holding things up. So that's how William Morrison and Joe Hines got together. Well, during working on this case with Joe Hines finally admitted to William Morrison that his real name was Jesse Evans, and he had taken the name Joe Hines when he was released from a Texas prison in 1882. He told Morrison about his time with Billy the Kid and the Lincoln County Wars, and Morrison was actually related to the Maxwell family. And so this really got his attention, and he was very interested in this story. And then, to his amazement, Hines told him that Billy the Kid was not killed on July 14th, 1881 by Pat Garrett. And he was still alive and well, and he was going by the name of Ollie L. Roberts in Hamilton, Texas. So upon completing all the work he had with Hines, Morrison got Robert's address and started corresponding with him by mail. Back then, you know, that's how we did things, snail mail. So he started corresponding with Roberts, who nickname was Brushy Bill. And Hines had also told him about Jim McDaniels, who was one of the last surviving people of the Lincoln County War. And Hines told Morrison that McDaniels was living in Round Rock, Texas. So he tried to get a hold of McDaniels, but what he found when he talked to people in Round Rock, that McDaniels had left there in 1945, and nobody knew where he went from there. So he couldn't get a hold of McDaniels. But he did arrange a meeting with Brushy Bill at his home in Hamilton, Texas. So when he got to Brushy's house, Brushy invited him in, introduced him to his wife Melinda, and right away, Morrison, not wanting to waste any time, he come right out and asked Brushy Bill if he was really Billy the Kid. Well, he told Morrison no, that he was not Billy the Kid, that was his half-brother, who was alive and well, living in Mexico, and so while Morrison was leaving, Brushy told him to, why don't you come back tomorrow afternoon? My wife's going to be out visiting with some friends, and we'll have the house to ourselves, and we can talk about this a little more. And Morrison asked Brushy Bill, he says, hey, if I pay all the expenses, would you be willing to go with me to Mexico and meet your half-brother? Well, he says, come back tomorrow afternoon. My wife won't be here, and we'll talk about it. So the next afternoon, Morrison showed back up at Brushy Bill's house, and Brushy invited him in, and Brushy told Morrison, he goes, I'm really Billy the Kid. I couldn't tell you yesterday. My wife, I don't want her to know, but I'm really Billy the Kid. And you're an attorney, and I was promised this pardon by the governor that never happened. Is there any way that you could help me get that pardon? And Morrison told him, he said, look, he goes, I'd be happy to help you, but we're going to need a lot of proof. So with that, Brushy Bill took his shirt off, and he showed Morrison a combination of 26 bullet and knife wounds. And many of them matched Billy the Kid's wounds that were known and recorded. So that got Morrison's attention real quick. And then Brushy Bill showed him how with his small hands and his big wrists, and being double jointed, he could easily get out of a set of handcuffs. Morrison kept all this in a journal. And in this journal, Morrison wrote that Brushy Bill was 5 foot 8 inches tall. He weighed about 165 pounds. He had blue eyes. He had small hands, big wrists, big broad shoulders, and a prominent nose and big ears. Well, all that fit the description of Billy the Kid. Well, I'm going with some notes, guys, so bear with me here. Bear with me. I got off my notes here. Sorry about that. Got off my notes. So anyway, Morrison, he was pretty well convinced that Brushy Bill was Billy the Kid. So he agreed to help Brushy get this pardon. And they's real careful to try to keep this away from Brushy's wife, but eventually she had to be told. And apparently she stayed with Brushy and didn't have any problems with it. So Morrison was recording all of this in a journal. And he also had a reel-to-reel tape recorder where he recorded conversation interviewing Brushy Bill. Now, a reel-to-reel tape recorder had just come out, available to the public in 1949. And I researched this, and the cost of one of those reel-to-reel tape recorders at that time was $1,600. Well, $1,600 doesn't sound like a whole heck of a lot of money today, but in today's money, that'd be pushing near $60,000. So Morrison was investing his time, his money, and as you'll see in a little bit, he even packed up his family and moved cross country to El Paso, Texas, so he'd just be closer, so he could to things that he needed investigating for this case to go through. So Brushy he told him his whole story, and his story was wild. He had one hell of a life. He said he had been born William Henry Roberts in Buffalo Gap, Texas, on December 31st, 1859. His parents were James and Mary Roberts. He said his mother had died in 1862, while his father was off fighting in the Civil War with Cantrell. He said being only 3 years old, he had an old aunt named Catherine McCarty who took him in and raised him as her own child along with her other son, Joe. They moved around a whole lot because Catherine didn't want Brushy's dad, Billy's dad, to come and take him away. She wanted to keep him. So they moved around a lot. And so they just trying to cover their tracks. And then when Brushy's story got to the night of July 14th, 1881, Brushy told Morrison that the man that Pat Garrett killed was really named Billy Barlow. And he told Morrison that Billy was part Hispanic, and he looked a lot like Billy. So as soon as Brushy heard that Barlow had been killed by Pat Garrett, he took off from the Fort Sumner area, and he went to Mexico. He figured that was his out. He was dead now. He could get away. So he went to Mexico for a couple of years. He returned to the U.S. in Carlton, Texas, and worked there for a while. And he said he was even arrested in Kansas City because somebody recognized him as Billy the Kid, but they had to let him go because Billy the Kid was dead. So he went on. He said that he worked for Buffalo Bill in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show for a while. He worked for Judge Isaac Parker in Fort Smith, Arkansas, from 1885 to 1889. He then joined the Pinkertons. He worked for the Pinkertons for a while. He become one of the Rough Riders, and he went to Cuba, and he fought there. He said he even had his own Wild West show for a while. And then, to beat everything, he said that he had fought with Villa in the Mexican Revolution. He said he'd been married 4 times, and he had used over a dozen aliases. So, with all this information, Morrison decided that he'd take Brushy Bill. He and Brushy Bill would go back to New Mexico, to Lincoln and Fort Sumner, and see if they could look up some of the folks that knew Billy the Kid that was still alive, and see if they could confirm that Brushy Bill was really Billy the Kid. So they went to Fort Sumner, they went to Lincoln, they went to the Lincoln County Courthouse, where Brushy detailed his escape from the jail there, where he killed the 2 deputies, Bob Olinger and James Bell. And they met with Servio Gallegos, Martil Abel, and Jose Montoya, and they also met with Bill and Sam Jones. Well, the first of the 3 were willing to sign affidavits after meeting Brushy Bill and talking to him. They signed affidavits, legal affidavits. That's just like, if you're lying, that's like perjuring yourself in court. But they signed these affidavits that Brushy Bill was in fact Billy the Kid. And the 2 Jones brothers, they wouldn't sign affidavits because they didn't want to get messed up in any kind of legal proceedings. But they told Morrison, yeah, Brushy is Billy the Kid, no doubt. So Morrison continued to work on this stuff. They went back to Brushy's home, who in Texas, which his wife and he had moved to Hyco, Texas in 1949. So they went back there. Morrison filed all the paperwork with the governor of New Mexico at the time, Governor Mabry, and included all the proof he had, all the signed affidavits, and arranged a meeting with the governor to get Brushy his pardon that had been promised so long ago. So they got to Santa Fe on November 15th, 1950. And they were supposed to have a private meeting with the governor. Nobody else there except a couple historians that Mabry had chosen on his own to see if Brushy Bill's story was right or wrong. But on the 29th, Morrison found out that the governor had leaked all this out to the newspaper. So everybody knew about it. And Brushy Bill was scared to death. He's an old man. And he's scared to death that this is going to turn into a dog and pony show. He might even get arrested and hung. So he was pretty upset. So Morrison contacted the governor and complained about it, and the governor said, well, yeah, he was sorry that he leaked it out, but rest assured it's going to be a private meeting. So a few hours later, when Morrison and Brushy Bill arrived at the governor's mansion where this meeting was supposed to take place, they go into the room, and everybody and their brothers there, photographers, newspaper people, Oscar and Jarvis, Pat Garrett's sons were there. Arcadio Brady was there, who was William Brady's grandson. He was there. The two historians that Mabry had picked out were there. And it was a circus. There was policemen there. There was a couple deputies from Carlsbad, New Mexico there. And Brushy Bill just knew that he was going to get arrested and hung. And he was an old man. And all this, he got so shook up that he had a stroke right there on the spot. So when it was time for him to get up and be questioned, he couldn't hardly talk. He couldn't remember anything. And eventually they took him into another room where he could lay down. And the governor came out and announced that he was not going to issue the pardon. And so Morrison took Brushy to a local doctor there, a doctor named Stan Lloyd, and confirmed that he had had a stroke and he was not in good shape. So as soon as he was able to travel, Morrison took him back to Hyco, Texas, to his home, where he met with another doctor there, a W.F. Hafer, and he also confirmed that Brushy had had a stroke and told him to go home and get as much rest as he possibly could. But on December 27th, 1950, Brushy got up and he was feeling pretty good. So he went and told his wife, he says, I'm feeling much better now. And she said, well, I got to run down to the post office here in a little bit. There's a package there that I need to pick up. And Brushy said, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling a lot better. I think I need to get out and get some exercise, some fresh air. He goes, I'll just go to the post office. I can walk down to the post office and back. Ain't no big deal. So on his way to the post office, Brushy had a major heart attack and just collapsed immediately to the ground dead. And that was the end of Brushy Bill Roberts. Morrison went on and continued and still tried to get Brushy his pardon, but was never successful. So guys, does it make sense that an educated man, an attorney, would waste his time, that he could be working on other cases, making plenty of money, but he would waste his own time and money if he wasn't convinced 100% that Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid? Come on, guys. Anything else doesn't make sense. You're going to hear the naysayers say that, oh, there was DNA testing and they proved that Brushy Bill wasn't Billy the Kid. Well, that's a bunch of hooey. There's never been any DNA testing. then you're going to hear the others say, well, Brushy Bill just went around telling everybody he was Billy the Kid for attention and be the big man in town and get free drinks at the bar. That didn't happen. He didn't even want his wife to know. You think he'd be out telling everybody in town that he was Billy the Kid if he didn't want his wife to know? Come on, if a story doesn't make sense, it's not true. So leave me in the comments what you think. Do you think Brushy Bill was Billy the Kid? I believe he was Billy the Kid. And if Brushy Bill was not Billy the Kid, he had one hell of a life. He had one hell of a story. So with that, guys, I'm going to tell you, stay positive, stay healthy, and God bless.